Joining me now, pollster Frank Luntz, Democratic strategist Ameshia, and Republican strategist Lance Trover. Good to have all of you here. Let me begin with you, Frank. It was a night, it was a long time coming from those who thought Beyonce was going to come for the DNC as well. But there she was, along with Kelly Rowland, giving a very fiery and impassioned speech about Texas, about reproductive rights, about being a mother. She even talked about that men, we need you. Did that strike the right chord with the voters that you think are most persuadable?
I found it fascinating that there are signs, freedom, freedom, freedom. Up to this point, there's been a Republican message. And now the Democrats, they co-opted it at the convention. They're using it now. It's very powerful. It's very impactful. But Texas is not in play. And what is clearly happening in these last 2 weeks or 10 days is that Harris is focusing on turnout. Rather than bringing new people, she wants to make sure that the people who support her now actually go to the polls. And this is important. Younger women love her. Younger women do not have a history of turning out to vote. If she can bring them new voters to the polls, that's a significant challenge to the Trump campaign. So the question that I have is it better at this point to raise turnout among those who already support you or continue to try to go for those last remaining persuadables, uncommitteds? And I think it's her message is very strong.
Well, Misha, interestingly enough, I mean, one of the first things she said after coming out into the stage was she talked about Colin Allred and said that she wanted him to be obviously in the Senate. That race is a little bit more neck and neck than anyone expected against Senator Ted Cruz. And yet here we are. And any president, whoever is behind that resolute desk, has got to have really a cooperative Congress. Otherwise, nothing's going to get done. Is this part of the strategy that it's not just top a ticket, but she's got to link into down ballot as well?
100%. This visit to Texas was for the down ballot race. I think that it has to be understood that Colin Allred has put everything into this race. As somebody who does not think that Texas is in play holistically, I do think that we will see people show up for Colin Allred. I also think that it takes a long time to see a state that has long been red even move towards having enough voter registration, enough excitement around a candidate for them to actually even, move the needle just a little bit, even if it's not a win. That matters. It took Georgia how many years to become a state that was actually competitive again? I think that it might take a similar thing for Texas. But the importance of the down ballot races we cannot forget, because with Kamala Harris's economic strategy around, more affordable housing, making sure that there are entryways for small businesses and expanding who can actually start a small business in addition to some of her health care plans, those things will require a certain, House majority as well as a Senate majority. So she's working to make sure that people understand the importance of those down ballot races. In addition to that, I do think that it's important to expand the base, but she recognizes this is a turnout race. This will be a base to base election. Her base has to also get fired up.
If that's the case, base to base, is in these final days of the election, we're talking about days of the election now, how do you assess and evaluate the threat to the Trump campaign by her focusing on states like this, thinking about the Senate races, not going to just the battleground state, so to speak? Is that going to effectively counter a Trump narrative or a Trump momentum?
I think if you look at the CNN poll that came out overnight and the Wall Street Journal poll that came out yesterday, it's easy to look at the head-to-head and say this is a tied race. But there have been warning signs for the Harris campaign that have been going on for months now. The top two issues in this race, look, she's got the abortion issue, she's got on lock, and I get it, she wants to turn her voters out. But what she's not talking about is lowering the cost of living. What she's not talking about is the immigration issue. And actually, by going to Texas, it gave the Trump campaign a really huge opportunity to once again raise the immigration issue back up because it's the biggest border state that we have. So I think you take those two things together and you look at the polling in both CNN and the Wall Street Journal. Cost of living is number one. Immigration is number two. Donald Trump leads by double digits in both of those issues. And so until she really starts addressing those issues, and frankly, I haven't seen her really do that this week at all, I think she's really going to struggle going into the last 10 days of this race.
Trump honed in on what he's been talking about with immigration in particular, and he's doubling down on some pretty wild rhetoric that she herself talked about as very insulting and thought she was shocked about it. He likened the United States to a, quote, garbage can for the world, and reiterating legal threats of jail election officials and political operatives when he wins, he says, about this idea of it. People have looked at that and talked about it with respect to immigration in particular. I wonder how voters are receiving rhetoric like that when he is not just talking about it as a garbage can, but he's linking it to other nations dumping people as if human beings could be trash into the United States of America. Is that resonating, no matter how wild the rhetoric, is that resonating with voters?
Just did sessions within the last 48 hours. And even newly minted Trump voters don't like it. They really want him to keep quiet. They want what he wants to do more than what she wants to do. They approve of his agenda more than hers, but they don't like him. And they don't like this rhetoric, and in fact, they resent it.
But does the dislike or resentment translate to, I can't vote for you, or just, I don't like you, but I'll do it?
It means that Trump, he is one step away from losing them, but she won't win them, he'll lose them. And I do want to compliment that you see this effort for small business, which is another example of the Harris campaign taking away a traditional Republican, in this case, constituency. The key in all of this, I think, are going to be Latino voters. They represent roughly 20% of the electorate. In every survey, they're showing weaknesses for Harris, strength for Trump, and yet he's using this language that could alienate them. He's dancing on a pin right now, and I wonder, can he do this for the next 10 days?
But I'd argue that this is a new language. He's said very vile things about immigrants for a long time, and we still see, unfortunately, this almost very stubborn Latino percentage of voters who consistently support him in state after state. If anything, he has gained in terms of his leverage with Latino voters, even though he's out here saying wild things like this, referring to any human, no matter where they are from, as trash. Inserting an idea that because somebody may not have come, this may not be their nation of origin. Being mindful that Donald Trump's grandparents were also immigrants. Being mindful that 2 out of the 3 of his wives were also immigrants. Being mindful that he has people on his campaign right now who have immigrant backgrounds or are first-generation Americans. That's wild.
Okay, what I don't understand, and I agree with all that, is that he uses this language, and yet his numbers are going up over the last 2
Because America
weeks.
has a lot of xenophobic people.
No, these are among Latinos, first-generation Latinos. How can he speak that way, and yet they seem to be embracing him?
I think you would have to ask a first-generation Latino.
Well, I think it's pretty clear they're not happy with what's happened over the last 4 years at the border. I mean, let's call it for what it is.
He's targeting their community specifically.
But they're
They're as
for him.
upset as anybody is on what's going on at the border. And I think the problem for the Harris campaign in her messaging is that she continues to pretend like she had nothing to do with the border problems that we've had. She and Joe Biden came into office and undid all of the Trump border policies, which led to millions of immigrants coming into this country. And I think her failure to at least acknowledge that every time she steps out, which is what she did again at the CNN town hall the other night, to pretend none of that happened, really is an insult to many of these voters. Voters are not stupid. They know how we got to this point. And so I think if you look at it, that's why, when Donald Trump leads on an issue by 16 points, it's because these voters are very unhappy. 70% of this country believes we're on the wrong track. And so that's why you're seeing the numbers you are.
I think some people are often, the talking point I hear is, I came in the quote-unquote right way, and therefore I have some ability to look down the nose at those who've come in the quote-unquote wrong way, and they use that to compartmentalize their viewpoints. And I've seen this in different polling. You've talked about this polling before. He is not talking about me. Now, be it far from me to assess whether that's the right frame of mind. It would not be my own viewpoint. But you look at these issues, Ameshia, and I do wonder, given the fact that she was in Texas today, and she did not address immigration. Instead, she pulled in and talked about what, Lance, you said Democrats have a lock on about the future, about looking and saying, do I want my daughters to have more rights or less rights than I did now? That seems to be a very compelling argument for a lot of voters, a lot of Republican voters as well, where abortion is a bipartisan issue.
Well, yeah, and I think part of that is because 54% of the American electorate is women. We've seen organizing across college campuses because obviously younger women are the ones who are at dire peril considering they're in the most fertile years. But we've seen women across multiple states, and many of them Republican women, women who are pro-life, who have had issues where they themselves had their lives at risk because a child that was no longer viable, a child who had significant abnormalities, who was not going to live, they had to carry because of extreme abortion restrictions in their states. I think that it's very important that we recognize that this issue is something that crosses all, cultural lines in addition to partisanship. It does not have a partisan leaning. Women care about abortion rights. Will that be enough? I'm not exactly sure, because I do think that, abortion rights have been on the ballot multiple times. This isn't the first election cycle they've been there. And we've seen time and time again where, women may be upset about it, but Republicans still seem to egg out those races. We've seen it. We've seen it specifically in the Senate. So it's very frustrating. And I don't know how, I think that this is going to fall down between, I don't think it's going to fall with Latino voters. I think it's going to fall down with white women voters. If white women voters show up and they show their support for Kamala Harris, be it whether it's on abortion rights or whether it's on the care economy or anything else within her plan, it's going to come down to them. Because if they do what they did in 2016, if they do what they did in 2020, vote for Trump in higher numbers, because they did in 2020, then this is going to be a loss.
Well, to be fair, both Harris and Trump are campaigning and having rallies in areas that are not necessarily going to go blue or red for them, respectively, but they well know their rallies are picked up nationally. You have Beyonce on. I don't care if it's just Texas or Houston. Everyone's watching as well, Kelly Rowland included. And Trump has his own list of people he's hoping to compel the nation to watch as well. And so, the power and magic of television. Everyone, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.